Okay, guys, back to our book reading. Again, the book I'm reading is Gods of the Bible. And before we get started, I just have to say I have had several people unsubscribe and send me these really, really um, ugly messages. That's the best way I can put it. Um, this book has really ruffled some feathers. And the only thing I can say about that is again, that cognitive resonance. Anything that challenges your core beliefs, it's scary and it makes people angry. Angry enough to where they're fighting mad. Don't you talk about my God. Don't you talk about the Bible. But if you open your mind, use critical thinking, and reread those scriptures in this book that we've been told is the Word of God, what you need to ask yourself is which God? Because it's very clear that there's more than one. Everything in the Bible, yes, there's some very wonderful historic information in there, but there's also a lot of information in there that's been deliberately manipulated and changed around and tweaked a little bit to develop a certain mindset regarding religion and the almighty God of the Bible and what he requires of us and all of this. But again, once you use critical thinking and reread those scriptures and actually take the time to go back, and if it's a word that you don't understand or something that kind of jumps out at you, research that. Research it. Again, one thing that's in the Bible, it says, let the hearer hear and the seer see. And a lot of people will not get this information because number one, you have to use critical thinking. Number one, you have to be courageous enough to step out of that box and look in. Or you have to be at a certain level of consciousness to get it, for it to make any sense to you. So this is definitely for truth seekers. So if you're just dead set against, you don't want anything that's going to ruffle your belief system, this is not for you at all. And I totally get that. This is not for everyone. It just may not be your time. So anyway, the last chapter we went through was the fall of mankind, regarding the Garden of Eden and how all that was the Garden of Eden actually a garden of paradise and wonderful, or was it some type of a experimental complex? And I'm more inclined to believe that it was some type of experimental complex. Go back and review the chapter that we just read. It's eye-opening. All right, we're going to get started back again today. This is chapter 6, Back and Forth with the Elohim. Back and Forth with the Elohim. And the first subheading is the sign of Cain. So let's get going. After Adam and Eve had left the fenced and protected place from which God expelled them, they must provide for themselves. The Adamites' new life outside Eden, immediately begins uphill, as the story of Adam and Eve's sons, Cain and Abel, shows. After killing Abel, Cain is banished from his tribe. After hearing the judgment and punishment God has reserved for him, Cain makes an extraordinary remark about the consequences of this punishment. I will be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. Genesis 4:14. At Cain's request, the Lord then puts a mark on his face so no one can kill him. But who on earth could kill Cain if Abel was already dead? And the other two people ever born were Adam and Eve, their parents. Assuming that the Adamites are a specific ethnic group created through genetic engineering and cloning, as discussed in previous chapters, it is clear that when Cain goes into exile, he finds himself among foreign people who do not have the same characteristics as the Adamites, and are therefore barbarians. Cain fears being killed by them and expresses his fear. Those who cannot accept these assumptions say that Cain is afraid of being killed by his own relatives, which would imply that Adam and Eve had other children, and that Cain was afraid of being killed by them. Now, there undoubtedly were other relatives. According to Rashi de Troyes, one of the most important Jewish exegetes, Cain was born with a twin sister, and Abel was born with two. Twin births were common in the reproduction supported by the Elohim, so this also fits perfectly at our discourse so far. I need to look up that information. I've never heard of that. Side note. What is strange is not that there were other relatives, but that the Lord would put a mark on Cain's face so that his twin sisters or relatives, whoever they were, would recognize him. Much less could Cain have been afraid of being killed by animals, because even if God had put a mark on Cain's face, the animals certainly would not care. Again, these are just a few curiosities that we wanted to mention to understand that the story, as it's told to us, is less logical than it appears when read in a way that is consistent with the text. The oddities of the antediluvian Adamites and patriarchs, however, certainly do not end with Cain. The next subheading is antediluvian patriarchs. Let us look more closely at the family tree of Adam. Genesis chapter 5 is exciting because it contains a list of antediluvian patriarchs whose ages and lineages are recorded. In particular, it says that Adam lived 930 years, Seth 912, Enosh 905, and so on. The last patriarch mentioned is Noah. His figure is particularly famous because it's associated with the Great Flood. Lamech, the last patriarch mentioned before Noah, lived 777 years. Thus, we have seen that a very long lifespan characterized the lives of the antediluvian patriarchs. There would be much to say on this point. Many traditionalist commentators, unable to accept unorthodox truths, try to explain this oddity in various ways. However, the truth is that the Bible does not speak here of lunar years or resort to other kinds of calculation. It speaks of years as we understand the term solar years. It also seems arbitrary to resort, as some exegetes do, to all sorts of hermeneutical, can't say that word, and numerical categories to make sense of the long lives of the antediluvian patriarchs. As mentioned in chapter 1, we have already established that our methodological approach dictates that what the Bible says is true to the letter. In addition to indicating the long ages of the patriarchs, the Bible tends to give the name of the firstborn of each one of them, but also add at the end of the formulative expression, and they had other sons and daughters, Genesis 5:7. From all this, we infer that the genealogy of the Adamites is not a series of people coming one after the other in a way that their ages add up continuously. Instead, because of their very long lives, we need to conclude that they were all coeval of each other, as were the sons and daughters. So we must imagine a population of Adamites that consisted of hundreds, if not thousands of people, as each of them begat sons and daughters. And of course, each of those sons and daughters in turn reproduced and multiplied. So the group of the Adamites became, with time, more and more numerous. While all the patriarchs were treated similarly, it is worth underlining a passage in Genesis 5:13. because a particular expression is used there for Seth that is not used for the other descendants of Adam. Seth is the third son of Adam and Eve. When God created the Adam, as seen in the previous chapters, it is said in the Bible that the Elohim made him in his image and likeness. Genesis 1:26. Similarly, when Adam was 130 years old, he begat a son in his image and likeness. Genesis 5:3. For Seth, and only for Seth, the same expression is used as far as the creation of Adam and Eve in the image and likeness. The same is not said of any of the other patriarchs. This indicates that Seth was probably created by some particular intervention of the Elohim, of the sort we have seen in the previous chapters. All children are formally born in the image and likeness of their parents, or at least in the image and likeness of one of their parents. However, here, as in the case of Adam, the author deemed it necessary to emphasize that Seth was created in his image and likeness. The creation of Adam, as seen in previous chapters, occurred thanks to the Teslim of the Elohim, that is, by genetic engineering. We can assume that the same thing happened with Seth. So perhaps there is a continuity of intervention which would not surprise us. Adam then begat more sons and daughters after the age of 130 and lived 930 years. The Bible lists a long list of patriarchs who lived long lives as anticipated above. So Adam was coeval with Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, and Jared. This means that Adam died shortly before Noah was created, as one can verify from reading Genesis 5. Again, the lives of the antediluvian patriarchs do not follow one another, but they overlap. This is a long genealogy of people who knew each other personally, since they all probably lived in the same area at the same time. The picture below can help visualize the lives of the patriarchs as described in the Bible. I'm going to show you guys this page. So you'll be able to see it. So it starts off with Adam, Seth, Enos. Let me give the ages to Adam. He had a son, Seth, at the year of 130. Adam lived to 930 years. Then Seth had a son at 105 years old named Enos. Seth lived until he was 912. Enos had a son, Canaan, at the age of 90, and he lived, Enos lived to 905 years. Canaan had a son at age 65, Mahalalel, and Canaan lived until the age of 895. Mahalalel had a son at, maybe I got this wrong, hold on. Mahalalel had a son at 65 named Jared. Mahalalel lived until 895 years old. Mahalalel had a son at the age of 162, and Jared lived to 962. The son he gave birth to was Enoch. Enoch had a son at the age of 65, and his son's name was Methuselah. Enoch lived till 365 years. Methuselah had a son at age 187 named Lamech. Methuselah lived to 969 years. Lamech had a son at age 182. Lamech lived until 777 years. Lamech's son, the son he gave birth to was Noah. Lamech died, I said that already, 777 years old. Noah had a son, had two sons. That's what it looks like. Or is it three sons? He had three sons. Noah, at the age of 500, had Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Noah lived until the flood came at the age of 600 years old. And then Noah eventually died at 950 years old. And that's the end of the chart. Now, when Seth was 105 years old, he begat Enosh. Another very curious and unusual statement is made about this event. A son was also born to Seth, whom he named Enosh. Then the people began to call on the name of Yahweh. Read that again. A son was also born to Seth, whom he named Enosh. Then the people began to call on the name of Yahweh. That's Genesis 4:26. We learn here that the name of Yahweh began to be invoked at the time of Enosh. This leads us to believe that Yahweh was not invoked before Enosh, i.e., at the time of Seth, Cain, Abel, Adam, and Eve. When the Elohim created the Adamites, Yahweh's name was not invoked. If we read the Bible carefully, we can understand why. Yahweh is called in the Bible Ish, Malchama, which means man of war. Yahweh was a soldier, a military Elohim. In the beginning, the Elohim worked, grew crops, raised livestock in Eden, experimented with food, and created a new species, the Adamites, to work for them. The intervention of the Elohim with the characteristics of Yahweh was unnecessary at this point. So, Yahweh comes around later. If Yahweh is mentioned in the Bible before Enosh, this is probably due to later interpolations by copyists and editors of the biblical text. Adam begets Seth when he was 130 years old, and Seth begets Enosh when he is 105 years old, which means that Yahweh is not invoked for at least 235 years. But let us continue with the genealogy of Adam, for the surprises are not yet over. Let us focus on one particular name in the long list of antediluvian patriarchs in Genesis 5, the name of Jared. When Jared had lived 162 years, he became the father of Enoch. After he became the father of Enoch, Jared lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Jared lived a total of 962 years, and then he died. That's Genesis 5:18 through 20. The name Jared hints at some important events about which biblical and extra-biblical literature talks diffusely. We will discuss this in our next section. Whoa, wow, this is deep, y'all. I'm going to read one more subtitle, The Great Descent. Okay, significant events in the Bible and other examples of ancient literature are often recorded in names. The verbal root from which the name Jared is derived means to descend. Since our studies in this field began, we were always convinced that in the name Jared was recorded the memory of an important descent. All the more so because Jared's son Enoch is later told to be actually traveling with the Elohim. Let us focus for a moment on Jared and the descent that must have happened at the time of his birth. The Bible gives no detailed account of this event. However, Genesis 6 says that the sons of the Elohim saw that the daughters of the Adam were tavot, beautiful, that is, suitable. Thus, they took as many as they wanted as wives. The Bible does not tell us exactly when or how this happened. It only allows us to understand that it happened before the time of Noah, because when it speaks of the flood, it is clear that the Elohim wanted to bring order to the situation that became confusing because of the interbreeding that had occurred. At the time of Jared, however, it occurs to us that there was, as the name implies, a descent. Can we find references to a significant descent in biblical or extra-biblical literature? The answer is yes. We can find references to this descent in the biblical Apocrypha, particularly in the book of the Watchers. This book tells the story of 200 rebellious angels who descend to heaven to join Adamite women, thus confirming what is the beginning accounted for briefly in Genesis 6. The sons of the Elohim took the daughters of Adam, the Adamite women, as companions and wives. The book of the Watchers is more detailed than the Bible in its account of the story. And it came to pass that the children of the Adamites, which were born in those days, multiplied, and they were born unto them beautiful girls. When the sons of heaven saw them, they fell in love with them, and said to each other, Let us choose wives from among the daughters of the Adamites, and beget children. Says Mezah, the leader of the group of angels, said to them, I fear that I alone will pay the penalty for this great sin. Semetzah is afraid that he is alone will be punished when the generals hear about their decision to join Adamite women, which must have been forbidden. At Sezesma's complaints, however, all the angels answered, No, we all swear and promise that we will not evade this feat. We will not evade this feat, and will put it into practice. Furthermore, they swore and promised to each other, all 200 of them. The exciting part is yet to come. The book of the Watchers reports that went down to Ardis, to the top of Mount Hermon. They called it Mount Hermon because they swore on it. This is a fascinating piece of information. Syncellus, an 8th-9th century Byzantine scholar, in commenting on Ardis, said that the reading they descended to Ardis is incorrect. Instead, it should read, they descended in the time of Jared. Syncellus, many other interpreters have said that the reading in Ardis is incorrect, as is evident from the Aramaic and Greek. Instead of they descended to Ardis, we should read they descended in the time of Jared. We can thus positively affirm that our intuition was correct. The name Jared indeed hints of a great descent, as described in the book of the Watchers. During this time, 200 angels, or as the Bible calls them, sons of the Elohim, came down to earth and took Adamite women as wives. The biblical Apocrypha helps us to understand that in the time of Jared, the sons of Elohim, namely for those who believe that Yahweh is God, the sons of God, descended to earth and took as many Adamite women as they wished. The famous Jewish exegete Rashi de Troyes says in his commentary on Genesis that the term beautiful means that the Adamites' daughters were made beautifully by adorning them, so when one of them had entered the wedding canopy, a mighty one would come and possess her first. The mighty one stands for one of the Elohim. they would enter the room and possess the women. Rashi de Troyes continues by adding that the Elohim would even take, that is, have sexual intercourse with married women, men, and animals. Whoa. Whoa. Some horny little dudes, huh? Oh my goodness. Wow. Okay, we're going to go ahead and stop here um, on page 106. The next subtopic is walking with the Elohim. This is fascinating. And I know a lot of this information sounds crazy. But what's even crazier is when you go back and read the scriptures and you really read it with critical thinking. That's crazy because it doesn't make sense if you're really honest with yourself. So anyway, I'll go ahead and stop here today, and I'll catch you guys next time.